Hi everyone and welcome to my first page, which is January of my Art Journal 2017 series. I know I promised to start this earlier, but I really do apologise. I'm sure that you're going to enjoy it just the same, and it just shows you can fit in your art journaling in amongst your busy lives. And I just thought I'd give you a little bit of an explanation as to what's been going on and keeping me away from making videos. At the beginning of the year, I was busy editing the show videos that we took of the children's gymnastics Christmas show, and I am still doing that because life interrupted that as well. But I'm still enjoying putting this together and hope the children love it when I finally get it finished, hopefully before next Christmas. Then Callum turned 18, so I made another video to document his journey from here to here, as well as his gymnastic exploits, which turned out to be a fun project, but again very time consuming. Then I got asked to do a massive and really fun job. Our gymnastics club has just moved into a new premises. You can see it needed a little bit of work, and I've been involved in that, including lots of masking for this striped wall in the toddler area of the gym, as well as decorating the party room. This was the fun bit, and I have had great fun. Some of you might have seen this on my Facebook page, decorating to my heart's content the party room for the children. In between the striping and the painting of Disney characters, we also took a little bit of time to do some upholstery, which was a new learning curve for me and some of my friends. And then there was more painting, and then Callum went to France and did some gymnastics with the gymnasts over in La Renaissance in Chalon, and this is him taking part, although you can see he's still having trouble with his knee. And then there was a few tablecloths to be sewn, and the party room was finished, and it does look great fun, and the children have already had their first party there, so they have enjoyed these Disney characters appearing, doing gymnastics in their party room, and I know they're going to have fun standing in front of this when they have the photograph taken on their birthdays. So I hope you forgive me for the interruption to play, but I will do my best to catch up and get myself back into the position of journaling once, or journaling one page each month as we go through the year. Enough with the excuses, on with the fun. First of all, I'm going to explain to you this year's format for the pages and things that you might want to do with your pages. So this is my January page, and you can see we've got a centre spread which is entirely dedicated to art journaling, and we've got a front pocket which I have chosen to reveal more of the background work that I did on the centre pages, as well as adding the month of the year. I may well come back and put something in this space, but for now I'm going to leave it in this clean format so you can really have a look at that background texture and technique that we have been applying. To the back page, which is also another pocket, and I have chosen to use this for scrapbooking. You could choose to do more art journaling, so there's plenty of spots to just keep this as completely an art journal and not have any scrapbooking whatsoever. And we have got two tags in the pocket. So we've got a horizontal, I'm going to call the horizontal tag, and you can see I've got journaling on the back of mine and a picture on the front. So mine are all memories from the month of January this year, and this was our Christmas tree. So once again I have chosen to use my tags for scrapbooking. So memories from the month of January. So in January, at the beginning of the year, our Christmas tree is still up, and I always find it's the time when you can really relax and enjoy the sparkling beauty of your tree after all that hard work is done, and that's exactly what I've journaled about on the back of the tag. So the choice is yours. You can use your tag to scrapbook, as I'm going to do, and capture memories throughout the year, or you can use your tag for more art journaling opportunities. And then we have a second vertical tag at the back of this page format, and you again can either use this to scrapbook, as I have done. I've scrapbooked all about my love of collecting, well, just Christmas tree ornaments in general, but I have some very nice Disney ornaments that I cherish and add to every now and again, and so this tag scrapbook's all about that. And again, if you're not into scrapbooking, you could do more art journaling on the tag at the back. So the choice is yours. I will be not showing you the scrapbooking element of this page format. I will talk you through the bits and pieces that I've done to give you ideas if you are going to follow the scrapbooking idea, but I'm going to concentrate purely on the art journaling. So without further ado, let's get on with it. So although I might vary what kind of cardstock that I use for each of the pages depending on what I'm intending to do in the way of technique, the measurements will all stay the same, and they are here for you to go back to and refer back to, and they will be at the beginning of each of the videos in this series. So I've tried to give you inches and centimetres, and I hope I've got them right, so check them on your first page, and anyone spots mistakes, get back to me and let me know and I'll put it right. So throughout this journal series you will see me mimic the background technique on all of the elements of this journal. So I will have the same background on the front pocket, the back pocket and the two centre pages. I will also vary from time to time perhaps the colour of the cardstock that I use for the base, although I think probably a lot of the time we'll start with white and see where we end up. It's quite a good base colour to put mediums on top of. So these were my journals from last year, and you can see they built up into quite a big volume of work, and they also had a tag, but they had lots of quite bulky embellishments. So I'm not restricting myself to not using any embellishments in the future, but I'm going to try and keep this journal a little bit thinner and concentrate more on the painting and the techniques throughout the journal than actually putting lots of embellishments on. So you can see they do build up quite bulky if you do that. If you like that, then you'll have to bear that in mind as you put your journal pages together. But the way that I'm going to bind them, which I'll show you at the end of the series, or perhaps maybe halfway through when we've got a few pages, then I'll give myself a little bit of room so that I can actually add, you know, a few embellishments without it getting too bulky or ending up in a fan. So just first of all, to talk you through a few of the things that I'll be using for this technique, I've got some Faber-Castell gelatos. So this cardstock is quite thick that I'm using, so bear that in mind if you're going to use a lot of wet mediums. And if, again, you are welcome to just use the ideas in this video as your starting point for your journal, and you can just take perhaps some of the colours or perhaps part of the layout and do all your own work, but follow sort of the principle of doing a page per month. Or you can, particularly if you're a beginner or you love the particular page, you feel free to copy it if you want to. I will be giving you some ideas as we put this together on substituting materials, because the chances are you haven't got the things that completely match the products that I've got, and vice versa. So as I'm sort of looking at how this goes together, you can see we're going to have the two pieces front and back, and then we're going to have our main art journal pages in the centre. So that's where we get to have the most fun with our art journaling adventure. I'll try to give you a complete rundown of the things that I'll be using, like these book pages in this journal. I'm also using gesso. You'll see me use that a lot. It may be a different make. This time I'm using my Cosmic Shimmer. I thought I might use this, but you'll see that I don't in the end, which is a pearl texture paste. And I definitely will be needing some baby wipes, as I will be using them to blend out the Faber-Castell gelatos, and I've also got my Faber-Castell big brush markers. So I will be using lots of different products, but as I said, I will give you alternatives that you might have if you don't have the ones that I'm using. So I've also got this matte medium that I'll be using as a glue and a sealer, because the Faber-Castell gelatos are water-based, and I will at one point need to seal them so that they don't get reactivated with anything that I put on top of them as I work through the layers of this background. I've got two stencils lined up that I've tried to pick, I'm thinking of a cold January day with blue skies, but it's still quite frosty feeling in the winter here in the UK. So that's the look I'm going to try and capture, and I've picked two stencils that I think will help with that feeling. And of course I've got my palette knife, which I don't use because I don't end up using the texture paste. So as we go through this, I'll give you as much information as I can about the products I'm using and why I'm using them in a particular way. And I will also, because I just start out really not knowing completely where I'm going, I may add in other products which I'll tell you about, or perhaps I won't use all of them. So as I use them, I will show you exactly what I'm using, and I will tell you why and how I'm using them. So when I'm working completely white background, it does confuse the camera a little bit. So as soon as we get some colour on the page, it will stop fading in and out of focus. So I'm using a flat brush, and I am adding gesso to all of my pages. Now the reason I'm adding gesso is because it is almost like a waterproof coating for your cardstock. Once it's dry, it will stop too much water seeping into your card, so it's quite a good protector, and it is a good base to start on. And I quite often use gesso. In fact, maybe if I'm using spray inks then I might not, but it stops your card being quite so porous, and it helps you blend your products on top of this once it's dry. Now if you keep your brush strokes smooth, and I am trying to do that, I'm using a flat brush to apply it because I want to create a smooth finish, and that way once it's dry there's not too much texture of my brush strokes in the background. So conversely, if you want to add lots of texture, you can add your gesso in lots of different directions, and that texture will show up when you put other products on top of it. So there's lots of uses for gesso, and I at the moment am using it as a base and a sealer for my page. And now I'm going to show you another way to use gesso. I'm going to be using some book pages, which is one of the favourite things that I use quite often in my art journaling. I just love the look of it on your pages. But because of what I'm going to use this for, I want it to be a little bit whiter. So what I'm doing is making a wash with my gesso. So I'm just using a little old Chinese container. I say old, but it's clean. And I'm adding some water, clean water, to that gesso. And I'm sort of making it a milky, thin cream consistency. And then I'm going to paint that all over my book pages. And I'm going to paint 4 of them in total because I don't know quite how much I'm going to use. I know I'm going to use it for my lettering, and I knew that I was going to use it for the trees, but I wasn't sure other than that. So I'm just hedging my bets and painting a wash of gesso over 4 pages. Now these pages are quite thin, so go a little bit careful if your book pages are thin. I'm not bothered about my brush strokes. I just want to make the page look a little bit whiter than it is at the moment, but I don't want the gesso to be so thick that you can't see the text underneath. So it's dry on your pages, you are ready to start adding the colour. Now these Faber-Castell gelatos are a water-based paint in a kind of lipstick, creamy. You can add them and scrub them on, scribble them onto your background like as if you were using a crayon, and then I'm using a baby wipe to blend them over my page. And you can see I've used the darker blue at the bottom and the lighter blue at the top. I'm thinking of a cold, frosty but sunny winter sky. That's the colour that I'm going for. And you can see all I'm doing is scribbling on the paint and then blending it out with a baby wipe. Now a few tips on that. If your baby wipe is really wet and you find that your colour is lifting off the background rather than blending, then just sort of pat your baby wipe on a kitchen towel to sort of take some of that moisture out if you've got an excessively wet baby wipe. But you'll find as you work they dry out a little bit and get to the right amount of moisture to move the paint around and blend it together without lifting it from the page. So if you ever feel that the paint is lifting rather than blending, you know that your baby wipe is too wet. So you can see here where I remove paint rather than blend paint with a baby wipe that's a little bit too wet. So I just dry that off on my scrap paper and add a little bit more paint and blend again. So the 2 colours I used are Snow Cone and Metallic Blueberry. So I've carried on that paint technique both on the horizontal pocket and the vertical pocket, and this is the technique that we're aiming for. So because I've got the two pockets, I can practice on one, get the technique right, and then show you how to do it. So this is what we're aiming for. This is the finished look that will be on our center pages, as well as our, actually this is the vertical pocket, and I'll show you the horizontal one. So we're starting out by making sure that everything is dry. So you can see I've changed the orientation of the blend on this one, as this is the horizontal pocket and this is where the word January will go. So the pocket on the back followed the same format as the centre page, and the pocket on the front I've changed the blend to horizontal. So now I want to add some texture to this background, but remember that this background is water based and it will move if you add anything wet to the top of it. So I'm going to take advantage of that property right at the beginning, and I'm going to remove some paint. So I'm going to use my stencil and my baby wipe, and I'm going to rub quite firmly through the stencil, as this stencil is quite small. You might not need to do it quite so firmly if you have got a bigger stencil. Now I'm not sure how well this is going to show on camera, so I'll try and do it on a dark bit so you can see what I'm doing. I'm actually removing paint through the stencil. Now you can see a little bit better the texture beginning to show. So in effect I'm rubbing the paint off. And I'm going to be doing that all over in random spots over the entire page. So this stencil is called Dot Fade, and you can see it's well used as it is quite versatile and lends itself to all sorts of styles. So you can see how that texture is building up, and I am using the properties of the gelatos, which is that they are activated by water, to remove some of the background paint that I've laid down in a dotty pattern. I'm thinking like little snow balls falling down my page. So now, because this is where I want that water action to stop, I'm going to use a clear gesso on top of this work. Now I was going to use my matte medium, but the one that I've got left is quite wet and it was moving that paint straight away. So I'm going to use this clear gesso by Prima, which is a little bit thicker, and actually the first time I've used it, so I'll be interested to see exactly how clear it dries. I didn't sort of think of why you might want a clear gesso, but this is the perfect place to use it. I want to keep all that work that I've done as well as sealing it, so I'm being a little bit careful. I'm using a big flat brush which I've dried. There's no water on it, so it's just product, and I'm trying not to go backwards and forwards too much over my work. So I'm just covering the surface, trying not to leave any gaps, and sealing the work that I've already done once this is dry. You can see it goes on quite milky and white where I've done it slightly thicker, but you will see that it dries completely clear and completely matte. So I was quite impressed by this in the first instance. So I'm just doing the first half, or the left side of the page first, because I wanted to show you how matte it actually is and how clear it dries. So you can see there that it's still quite milky, and I decided to use my heat gun. The only thing that I will say to you is don't go too close, particularly where it's thick, because you will get bubbling, and that is something that you might like and you might want to do on purpose, but at the moment I'm trying not to do that while trying to dry it quickly. So balancing patience with drying time here. And you can see as I dry this off, it does become completely clear. I'm hoping to show you that there isn't any degradation in the colour and that it is very matte, which is exactly what it says on the tin. So remember, all the processes that I'm showing you for the centre pages, I am repeating on the front and back, what will become pocket pieces when this page is put together. So a top tip when you're using your mediums, particularly anything that could be used as a glue or a sealer, they can be quite sticky in the jar, so clean off any excess before you put on the lid so that you can get it open next time you want to use it. Voice of experience, I've spent many a happy time knocking at the top of my container to get the lid off because I'm a little bit messy sometimes. So this is the Shattered Stencil by Tim Holtz, and I think it looks quite icy, like cracked ice, so that's what I'm using it for, although of course you can use it for spider's web as well at Halloween. And this time I'm using the gesso just like a paint. So rather than a brush, I'm using a piece of baby wipe, a little bit drier, or it's been sat on my desk so it's a little bit drier, and I'm trying not to add too much paint because that seeps under the, as you can see here, a little bit too much paint seeps under the stencil. It's not the end of the world if that happens, but I am trying to add less paint, see it's slightly better there, rather, or in this case gesso, rather than more. So I'm literally just placing this stencil randomly over my background to add more texture with the theme of frosty cracked ice. If you're working on acrylic paint, remember that that will dry and it will be permanent, so you won't be able to use that technique where I use the baby wipe to remove the paint from the background to create the white dots, but you can do exactly the same using some white acrylic paint or gesso instead, so you can still get the same look using acrylic paint or perhaps distress paints. So whenever you create a little work of art on an art journal page, it's always nice to frame it, and there's lots of different methods of doing that. I'm going to use a quite simple one today. So my paper, remember, I was sealed with the clear gesso. So now I can use these pens on top of that, and I've got some blending time. So these pens contain Indian ink, and they have a certain amount of time that you, while they're still wet and haven't completely dried, where you can blend them either with your finger or a wet baby wipe. And actually you can remove them entirely if you make a little bit of a mistake, if you're quick and everything is still wet. So you can see here I am using a combination of my finger and the baby wipe to remove and blend the pen and create a frame all the way around the edge of my page. So once you're happy with the amount and blend of frame that you've got around your work, then you can allow this to dry and it becomes permanent, so there's no need to seal this layer. So I kept working until I got to a blend around the outside edge of my page, and then I just wanted to slightly darken that edge right on the very edge. So first of all I've got a slightly darker blend, and now I'm going to keep this really fine. I'm just running the pen right along the very edge of the page, and I'm not trying to blend it up into the artwork. I'm literally just blending it along the very edge of the cardstock. And then I'm going to add some more dots into the background. So again, back to the dot fade. This time I'm using a little blending tool. It could be a makeup sponge if you were using this method. It could be paint that you're using, but I'm just picking up some of the ink from my pen. So this is again the cobalt turquoise. And again, I'm just adding some more dots into the background in a random fashion all over the page. So I'm literally just picking up the ink onto the sponge tip. This is another Faber-Castell tool that comes with your gelatos, and it just allows me a little bit of control and press through the stencil, adding some of that ink. And then I'm repeating the process again, but this time I'm going to use a slightly brighter blue. So this is the light cobalt turquoise. I'm changing applicators, otherwise I just won't get the effect of the slightly lighter turquoise if I use the one that's already got the dark ink on it. So I'm going to use a different applicator, but exactly the same process of adding the ink through the stencil in a random fashion. and I'm going to call that finished. So I don't need to seal anything because everything that I've used after that clear gesso is permanent once it's dry, and you can see I've got the horizontal blend on one page and the vertical blend on the other. But they've all got the same technique, giving me lots of lovely texture and colour ready for the artwork and details that we're going to put on top. You could have created that background using any colour combinations of materials that or paints that you wanted to. I've gone for a sky colour, as you know, because I'm going to pretend, or I'm going to try and create the look of some silver birch trees, just the trunks of the trees, and looking through them to that gorgeous blue wintry sky beyond. So I always like the look of artwork that have silver birch trees, and I have used it a couple of times on different projects. I've got a nice scrapbooking page using the kind of look of the tall, thin trunks of these trees that are so beautifully coloured and marked, which make them very interesting for any kind of art project. So I've decided to use my book pages for that. So these are the gesso pages that we had earlier, all now nice and dry, and I'm literally really randomly cutting different widths of tree trunk. All I'm doing is making sure that they are fatter at the bottom and thinner at the top, but they are varying widths, and I will display them in different combinations and angles to create a little look through a forest of silver birch tree trunks. That's the look I'm going for. So I've cut out and roughly laid out the trunks of my trees, and now I'm ready to glue this down. So I'm going to be using the matte medium for this, and because my paper is quite thin, I am trying to be careful not to wrinkle it. So I'm adding the glue to the page first, and it will dry matte, and then I am placing the paper down, just moving on to a slightly thicker brush that will make the job a little bit quicker, and then adding a top coat to seal the paper. That it's quite important that you do that, because I'm going to be working again with medium on top of it, and I don't want all that medium to sink straight into the paper. I want it to sit on top because I'm going to be creating some shading. So as well as sticking down the paper, the matte medium also acts as a sealing coat. You can use gloss if you like that look, but my preference is a matte medium and a matte finish. So once my trunks are glued into position, then I'm going to dry these off and trim off the top and bottom excess pieces of paper. Then I'm going to add some shading to both sides of my tree trunks. I'm going to do that in the first instance by using some more of that milky wash of gesso. Again, I'm aiming not to cover up that text as I add the shading. So I'm watering down my gesso, and then I'm using my grey Pitt pen as some colour to add into that gesso to create the shading. So I'm making sure to keep that well away from the paint because I don't want to contaminate the nib of the pen, but you can add it to your paint, or in this case gesso, and I'm just adding it to the very edge of the brush and dragging that down the edge of the tree. Now I did carry on with that method, as you can see, of just adding a little bit of the colour to my paintbrush on the edge and dragging it down the very edge of the tree, but I found actually it was a little bit fiddly, so I'm going to recommend doing it this way instead. I know I'm doing it on top of what I've already done, but I'm going to just say, because we've sealed that paper with the matte medium, I can just take the brush tip and do exactly as we did, or the pen tip, and do exactly as we did on the edge of the page and create shading along the edge of the tree trunk and blend it out with our fingertips. I'm also adding a little bit of shading where I will eventually do the line work to add the marks on the silver birch tree's bark. So I'm doing a combination of two things. Because I've already done the shading, I'm darkening the outside edge so that in this instance, the right hand edge of the tree trunk, just making that slightly darker, giving an illusion of a light source, and then adding random little strokes of the pen where I will add the detail of the bark with the black pen. So that was a little bit of an easier way to do it, which is why I didn't persevere with the other method. And it's easy for people perhaps that haven't got great painting skills to tackle doing it that way. Then making sure that everything is dry, then you can get out your black liner pen and start to add the details. So I've gone along the very edge of the tree, and I'm just using a slightly scribbly stroke to do this. I'm not being too precise. I'm running the pen in little short strokes along the edge of the tree trunk just to give that extra definition. And a few of my pens have seen better days, so you'll see me switch between different ones. And if you want to get a better idea of what the silver birch tree looks like, obviously it's easy to call up images on the internet. I looked at photos first, and then I called up other people's drawings, because quite often you'll see a style of drawing that you can tackle that perhaps is a little bit easier than being able to do a real life-size silver birch, or lifestyle size, no, not life-size, realistic, that's what I mean, version of a silver birch tree. So again, I'm just darkening that right hand edge, and where the one tree overlaps the other, I'm creating a little bit of shadow, and then adding in the shady areas where I'm going to add those marks on the bark. The bark of the tree, not the bark of the duck. So switching pens, because that one's not doing very well. It's really important, and I can't emphasize it enough. Patience. Let your paint dry and your glues dry before you put your precious liner pens to work and doodle on top of your art journal pages. So the grey Faber-Castell Pitt pen that I used was called Cold Grey, and now I'm using the black pen to add some branches to my trees. So I just wanted to add a little bit more interest to the top of the tree trunks, and this is how I've decided to do it. They might look a little bit strange at the moment, a little bit stuck on, but I've got a little plan for that. If you'll bear with me, I'm just adding in a few random branches to start with. So I let that ink dry for a moment, and then I'm coming back in with a white pen. And I'm scribbling over those branches, really keeping the strokes in sort of a sketchy motion, so that I'm not covering up all of the black, but just breaking it up a little bit so it looks more like those branches belong to the trunks, because they would too have the addition of the silver bark on those branches. So I'm just mimicking that with my white pen, and it does make the branches now look like they have actually grown out of these branches rather than just being stuck on. So you'll see throughout this series lots of different ways to do different things, and one of the things that you'll be able to use lots of different things on is the words. Now you could cut your month word from your die cutting machine, or perhaps you've got a set of dies with lettering that you could use to add the month to the edge of your page, but I'm going to show you a different technique. Now ideally I would have flipped this word January, which I have sized to fit along the edge of the page, so I've got sort of the maximum width of letters, and I would have actually mirror imaged it, but I couldn't work out how to do it. So all I'm going to do, because I can see through this paper, is use the fact that I can use it as a way of cutting the letters out. So I'm going to be cutting the letters out of the book page. This could be any pattern paper that you want, and I'm going to stick it to the back of the paper, and because I've flipped that over, remember that we had the white on one side, so I'm going to stick that here, and I'm going to use it as a template to cut around And I'm just using a glue stick in order to secure it to the book page. And then I'm going to carefully cut around all those letters. Now, some of you that have been scrapbooking for a long time might recognise this technique. This was a technique that we would have used pre all those lovely things like the Cricut cutting machine, etc. And before we had all those lovely alphabet dies for machines like our Sizzix or Cuttlebug. So this is quite a good technique to use in your art journals, particularly if you're not into scrapbooking and haven't collected all those tools. So you can either mirror image your writing, or you can do as I've done. Actually, the mirror image probably wouldn't have worked as I'm sticking it on the back of the paper. But if you printed it out onto cardstock and wanted to cut around it without having your lines visible, then you could use the mirror image. But this is working quite well. As you can see, I'm cutting out some nice letters, and then I'll use a craft knife to remove the centres of the A, or the two A's and the R of the word January. Really wanted to make these letters pop, so I have placed the letters evenly across the width of the page, and I am just drawing around them with a pencil. And then once you have done that, you can remove your letters and you've got the perfect outline to colour in. And I'm going to be using the Cobalt Turquoise Pip Pen and carefully trace around and fill in those letters. Now you could use this same technique with letter stickers or even your die cut words. You could trace around them exactly the same way. Obviously with the stickers you'd have to be careful that you didn't permanently stick them down while you were drawing around them. You'd have to place them quite lightly, and then you could either paint in or colour in. You could use pro markers for this, you could use coloured pencils for this. Colour in what will become the shadow, and then stick your patterned papered letters, in this case my book page letters, offset on top of the shadow that we've created. It's important to try and move them all the same amount. You can see my letters are coming away slightly from their backing. I could have taken that off, but it is stuck in some places and quite so well in others. So I'm making sure I glue it down as I go, and make sure that you move your letters all in the same direction as you offset them. So I'm going up slightly and slightly to the left. And you've created a lovely. And then using the same sketchy strokes, I'm just going around my letters to make sure they really stand out from that background. So using a fine black pen, just sketching around each of those letters. So I know that I'm not really going to add too much more detail to my page. I'm not going to put any brads through it or anything like that. So I'm ready to stick on my pockets. And the technique for this will be the same throughout the whole series of videos. So I've cut some 1-inch strips to start with, and I'm just using a scrap piece of card to do this. I've cut out some 1-inch strips. I've got 3 for each page. All of them are slightly longer than the longest edge of the page, and then I'm scoring them in half at 1/2 inch. So in centimetres you probably get away with a 2 centimetre strip scored at 1 centimetre. Now the reason I'm sticking the pockets on with these folded strips is to give me some room for my tags to move in and out. I know I'm going to be adding some layers to these tags because I'm going to be scrapbooking on them, and I want to create that little bit of wiggle room, and I'm doing that by creating this little V-shaped addition to secure the pocket to the page. So this is going to be the horizontal pocket, so the first pocket that you create will open on the right hand side, and I'm literally just placing the strip about 1/16 of an inch, 1/4 of a centimetre maybe, in from the folded edge of the page, and then trimming at 45 degrees ready to add the 2 side strips. So I'm adding glue, and then the fold of the piece goes along, or the strip goes along the folded edge of the page, the center fold of the page, and it's just roughly a 16th of an inch in from the edge of the page itself. And then I'm using that 45-degree angle, the angle that I created, to trim the top and bottom strips to match and fit. Now they don't have to fit exactly, but near enough will do. Again, making sure that you don't glue those strips completely closed. Be careful for how much glue that you use. And then again, the top and bottom strips just sit in about a 16th of an inch from the edge of the page. Now, as we go through this series, I won't dwell too much on the addition of the pockets, because once you've seen it once, I'm assuming that you're following along and playing along. I will probably direct you back to the first video to see. I'll probably do it a couple of times, and then I'll resort to that tactic rather than have to keep explaining it to you over and over again. So now we're ready to attach this page, which we know fits exactly on top, size-wise, of the page, the double page spread. Again, being careful with your glue, and take your time here to make sure that this really sticks down well and that you've got it positioned exactly on top so that all your edges match. So take a little bit of time to make sure things line up, and then spend some time pressing it down while the glue dries. And then you're going to repeat that process on the back page. This time we want the pocket to open at the top, so we've got 2 long strips on the left and right edges of the page and a short strip across the bottom. So again, keeping that 16th of an inch in from the edge, spending a bit of time making sure that's well secured, adding the right and left hand edges. So you're creating, in effect, a U shape in the vertical position. And then you can use those 2 strips to trim your bottom strip into the right length and shape. And then you can glue that into position. Again, like I said, it doesn't really matter if they don't match up perfectly, which mine don't here in this instance. It's a case of them being secured in the right position and secured well, and then being careful to line up your top page, which forms the pocket, and taking a little bit of time to make sure that, 1, you don't glue the whole thing together because you've used too much glue, and 2, that it's nicely positioned exactly on top of the double page spread, so that all the edges line up nicely, and they should just sit a little bit back from the fold so that when we are opening and closing this, they won't get in the way. So there's probably about a 16th of an inch in the measurement. So once you've lined up the front edge of the page, the opener edge of the page, that folded edge will just protrude slightly from the edges of your pockets. So I've got 2 pockets in position. Now, in this centre section, you can do anything you want. I'm choosing to add a quote that I felt was relevant to the month of the year, so it's about New Year's resolutions, and I am using a combination of stickers. These ones are from Tim Holtz, and I've also got some letter stickers from my stash. You can see I'm unsuccessfully using my ruler to try and line them up. And then I'm using some glitter letter stickers that I've had a long time, so I'm sorry I can't give you the make of them. but I'm mixing and matching my fonts. You could use letters that you've cut out on your die cutting machine, you could stamp the words that you want to use, or you could actually use it as a journal, as many people do, and write down your thoughts in this centre section. It's entirely up to you how you use it and what you choose to say on your page. You might not like words and you might just want the picture to speak for itself. So I've chosen to use "May your troubles last as long as your New Year's resolutions." Now, if you're really good at keeping your New Year's resolutions, then this quote does not apply to you. But most of us make them and very quickly break them, and that's just how you want your troubles, not lasting too long at all. So I'm not going to show you step by step through the scrapbooking itself, because this is really more about art journaling, and I'm just going to give you a few ideas about how to lay out your scrapbook pages on your tags if that's what you choose to do. It may well be that you choose to use your tags as more art journaling surface. That's entirely up to you. So our first page, we've got our title for the month, and I have got room to write something else if I wanted to. I could write more memories on this page if I chose to, all about January. And I've got my art journal page, and then on the back page I have chosen to journal about Comet. And again, I've repeated some of the elements. I've got the black as the frame, I've got some more book pages, and I've kept things fairly simple. You don't want to create too many layers, then you won't be able to get your tags in your pocket. Same goes with your art journaling if you decide to do that instead. So I have got sort of some of the elements repeated, like the white, which is in the trees, and I've got black, which is obviously in the lettering and the sketching that I've done. So I've kind of made the layout of my pages have something in common, at least something to link them to the artwork that they're sitting inside. So this page, again, I've repeated the same pattern paper as I've got my front tag. I've added some doodling with a white pen. I've used the gesso to create strips to journal on, and I've kept the layout again fairly simple. You can't make this too thick, otherwise it won't go back into the pockets. And by repeating those elements, you really do make your scrapbooking look like they belong in the art journal pages. And this really is going to be a great fun. Remember, I'm showing you here, make sure that you don't make your tag too thick so that it doesn't sit back in the pocket. So I've got one pocket on the horizontal and one pocket on the vertical, and that's how your page looks. And I really hope that I've inspired you to start a little late, but better late than never, your art journal for 2017. So in the interest of sharing the inspiration, there are two places where you can post the pages that you've made inspired by this set of tutorials. You can either post direct to my Facebook page, which I'll leave a link for down below as well as on the screen, and you can use the hashtag ArtJournal2017. Alternatively, if you're not a Facebook user, you could use the Google Plus community that I've set up. Currently I am the only member, so I really do need some company. I've called it Art Journal 2017. Again, I've left you the link, and there will be a link down below. So I look forward to seeing the work that you've created inspired by these videos. It's all about the sharing, it's all about creating pages that you love, and just having this sort of set of tutorials as your starting point. And I look forward to seeing the journals and pages that you create throughout the year. So this is just a quick look at those final tags and pages that group together to form the art journal page for January. So the first page in this series of tutorials. So it will be fun and exciting to find out where this journey is going to take us, and what kind of art and techniques we're going to enjoy along the way. I hope you've learnt something and are feeling inspired. And as usual, I just want to say a great big thank you to all of you that leave me lovely comments and who were anticipating the start of this series. And I really hope that I have inspired you to start late with me. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the like button, and of course that all important share button. And I'll see you again very soon. I'm off out into the garden. You can see our grass needs a little bit of tender loving care, but that's down to Ivan. I'm going to weed this flower bed because look at those gorgeous flowers. You can't see them for the weeds. So until next time, Thank you for watching. As usual, I'll leave you with a couple of links. This one's to my Etsy shop where I sell online workshops, and I will show you how to make projects like this one. Perfect gift for a new baby, and it contains, or will contain when you've made it, a beautiful mini album to mark the first year of a newborn's life. You could also make something like this, which is the Pyramid Mini, and you can style it up to suit the person that you intend to give it to. You can put a lovely surprise inside when you open up the pyramid, and it also contains a mini book to share photos of that special occasion of that certain someone in your life. Makes a brilliant gift to mark a special occasion. And as well as that, I'll leave you the list or the playlist for my 2016 journal, so you can see that all the fun that I had last year creating this journal.